Oh my God. Is that a private jet? Who the hell owns that? Wait, why does it have his initials on it? The family reunion was supposed to be just another awkward gathering of her snobby relatives and fake smiles. You know the type, forced laughter over dry barbecue and lukewarm beers, bragging about promotions at mid-level offices like they were royalty. For 17 years, I let them believe I was some broke, starving artist living from commission to commission. A hobby husband, they called me once, behind my back. I heard it. She laughed, but I played along. I kept it quiet. My art? It wasn't just art. It was branding, marketing, high-end licensing, NFTs, tech collabs, elite auctions. Forbes listed me as a billionaire 2 months ago, but they didn't know, because I didn't tell them. I wanted to know who loved me for me. So when I showed up at the reunion and the black Gulfstream G700 landed behind me, engines humming like thunder, their faces melted. I didn't say a word, just handed the keys to a sharply dressed assistant and told him, "Don't forget the champagne in the back." My wife's family likes to celebrate things they didn't earn. You should have seen the way they rushed me. Her mother, her father, uncles, cousins, they looked at me like I had transformed into gold. And her? My wife? She turned white, then red, then pale again, like she'd seen a ghost holding her secrets. That's when I knew. She wasn't happy for me. She was terrified. I didn't get it at first. I thought maybe she felt betrayed. Maybe she was mad that I didn't tell her about the Forbes article, that I'd hidden my wealth. But then I saw her texting, behind the garden tent, frantically, a panicked string of messages. And when I leaned over her shoulder just a little, she slammed her phone down like it was on fire. She laughed. "Just my sister. She's being dramatic again." Lie. I could see the name on the screen. Liam. Not her sister. Not even close. I swallowed the anger. I let the rest of the reunion play out. Toasted with the cousins. Took photos with her dad in front of the jet. But I was watching her. Closely. That night, back at the estate I had rented for the weekend, I pretended to sleep. I watched her sneak into the bathroom with her phone. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Then I heard it. Soft giggles, muffled whispers. She was talking to him. To Liam. I got up silently. Walked outside to the garden patio. Called an old contact in cyber forensics. I need every deleted message from this number. Fast. And off the record. The next morning, my inbox was hell. Messages. Photos. Audio files. From her. To him. Back and forth. And none of it could be mistaken for innocent. I can't stand pretending with him anymore. He still thinks I love him. Can you believe that? I just need a few more months until the inheritance kicks in. Tonight was amazing. The way you grabbed me at the hotel, I've never felt that with him. He's nothing but a sad little painter with a lucky streak. I didn't move for a full hour. Just sat there, letting the bile rise in my throat. Letting her voice and those recordings stab every inch of the life I had built with her. 17 years. Shared beds. Laughter. Vacations. I built empires and came home to a woman who kissed me like I was her only one, while being his every Thursday night at that downtown Marriott. She walked into the room humming. And I smiled. I smiled so wide my face hurt. She asked me what was funny. I handed her my phone. She took it, confused. And then she saw it. The screenshots. The texts. The audio file already playing. She dropped the phone. Stared at me like I just murdered her. "You're spying on me?" That was her first reaction. Not denial. Not regret. Rage. Like I was the villain for catching her. "I think you should sit down," I said calmly. "Because I haven't even started yet." Her mouth opened to speak, but then her phone buzzed. A message from Liam. Did he find out? She didn't touch the phone. She didn't breathe. And I? I walked over to the window, looked out at the gleaming jet sitting on the grass, and whispered to myself. They thought I was a struggling artist. Now they'll find out what a billionaire does when you stab him in the back. She didn't say a word for nearly a full minute. Just stood there, arms stiff at her sides, eyes flicking between my face and the phone screen like a cornered animal trying to gauge which way to run. I finally broke the silence. "How long?" She blinked. "What? How long have you been screwing him behind my back?" She crossed her arms, eyes sharp now. "Cold. You don't get to talk to me like that. You've been lying to me for years." I laughed, the kind of laugh that only escapes when your chest is splitting open. "You think hiding my money is the same as spreading your legs for Liam twice a week?" Her face twisted, not in guilt, but in anger. "You made me feel small. You kept me in the dark. Of course I looked for something real. There it was. The spin. The gaslight. She was turning it on me already. 17 years of marriage, and I'd never seen her more confident than in that moment, standing in our rented bedroom in silk pajamas, trying to rewrite reality while wearing another man's cologne. You don't even deny it? She shrugged. What would be the point? You already made up your mind. I stared at her, stunned. Not because of the betrayal, that wound had already been opened, but because of her tone. Like I was the problem. Like I had no right to be angry. And then she said it. You might be rich now, but you'll always be that awkward kid who needed me to fit in. Don't forget who helped you get your life together. I clenched my jaw so hard my molars hurt. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I didn't. I stepped back, sat on the edge of the bed. You know what, Heather? I said, slow and steady. You're right. You did help me once. You supported me when I was a nobody. But then, you decided I'd always be that nobody. She didn't flinch. You want to know the real reason I kept the money a secret? I wanted to know who really saw me. Not the money. Not the status. Just me. I stood up again, walked over to her slowly. She stiffened. Now I see you. I walked past her, opened the closet, pulled out the suitcase I had stashed there 3 days ago. Yeah, I had doubts before the reunion. She'd been distant, cold. Too many late meetings. Too many guarded phone calls. I'd suspected, and I came prepared. As I started packing, she sat on the edge of the bed, arms still folded. You're being dramatic. I zipped the suitcase slowly, turned around. And you're being evicted from my life. You think you can just walk away? She snapped. You think this fixes anything? You've got a reputation now. People know who you are. You really want them hearing about your perfect marriage ending in scandal. I looked her dead in the eyes. Go ahead. Tell whoever you want. But make sure you also tell them that the man you cheated on was the one who paid off your mom's debt, bought your dad his damn boat, and paid for your brother's rehab twice. That one landed. Her jaw dropped, just for a second. She started. No, you don't speak anymore, I said. You lie. You twist. You manipulate. And when you get caught, you perform. But I'm done watching your show. I pulled the phone from my pocket and tapped open the file folder marked Truth. Then I airdropped everything to her parents, her sister, her boss, even Liam's wife. Because yes, he had one too. As her phone buzzed and lit up with notifications, I rolled the suitcase to the door. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Where are you going? She asked, suddenly panicked. That tone I hadn't heard since she used to care. I looked over my shoulder, straight-faced. Anywhere you're not. I stepped out, letting the door click shut behind me, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt weightless. The lies were gone. Now, only fire remained. I checked into the peninsula that night. Penthouse suite. View of the skyline. Didn't even blink at the price. Money wasn't the issue. It never was. What I needed was silence. Distance. Air without her perfume in it. The next morning, I woke up to 86 missed calls. 24 from Heather. The rest from her family, Liam, and 2 unknown numbers that I figured were either lawyers or damage control lackeys. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I poured myself a drink, bourbon, neat, sat on the balcony in nothing but a robe, and played one of the voicemails she left at 3:14 a.m. I can't believe you would do this to me, she cried. To my family. You embarrassed us. Over a mistake. You always blow things out of proportion. I never meant to hurt you. Mistake. She called 3 years of cheating, lying, scheming a mistake. Like spilling wine on a carpet. Then came the texts. Please don't go public. We can fix this. It wasn't just about Liam. You were never really there. My mom's sick over this. Please. Call me. Not once, not once. Did she say she was sorry? Later that afternoon, my lawyer, Grant, flew in from Chicago. We met in the lounge downstairs. He flipped open his tablet, leaned in. You sure you want to play hardball? We could negotiate a quiet split. She's not getting a dime more than the prenup allows. He raised an eyebrow. That prenup was written when you were worth $20 million. Now you're north of $3 billion. I smiled. Exactly. And it still holds. He nodded, impressed. Cold. No. Fair. That evening, I received a message from Liam's wife. Emily. I barely knew her. We'd met once, Christmas party, maybe 5 years back. She was one of those women who always smiled like she knew more than she let on. Her text was short. I got your files. I'd like to talk. Woman to man. I called her. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. I've known about the affair for about a year. At first, I blamed myself. Then I started digging. She had dirt. Real dirt. Photos. Financial records. Even audio from a bug she'd planted in Liam's gym bag. These two weren't just lovers. They were scheming. Heather wanted access to my accounts. She'd even floated the idea of accidental power of attorney if anything ever happened to me. They weren't just cheating. They were planning. You're telling me they were trying to rob me? Eventually, yes, Emily said. I don't think she wanted a divorce. She wanted you to trust her completely. And then disappear. For a full minute, I couldn't speak. My tongue felt like concrete in my mouth. My heartbeat, cold and mechanical. Emily continued. I've already filed. He doesn't know it yet. I'm taking the house, the kids, and everything I can squeeze. Good, I said quietly. You deserve better. There was a pause. Then she added, so do you. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the suite, staring at the city lights, replaying 17 years of my life like a movie with a twist ending. The late nights I thought she spent working. The sudden business trips. The birthdays she forgot. The fake smiles. The way she always looked tired after her yoga retreats. The clues were there. I was just too blind to see them. But now? Now I saw everything. I wasn't just cheated on. I was targeted, played, disrespected, and I wasn't going to let it end with a clean break. I had built my empire with my hands. I knew how to destroy things, too quietly, legally, ruthlessly. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. Because you don't spend 17 years loving someone, building with someone, giving them your entire heart, only to watch them toss it aside like a receipt for something they didn't even want. Heather wanted a monster. She was about to meet him. The next morning, I met with a private investigator I'd hired years ago for a corporate espionage case, Paul. He was quiet, sharp, and operated in shadows most people didn't know existed. I trusted him more than I ever trusted my own wife. Find me everything, I told him. Liam, Heather, bank records, hotel footage, any offshore accounts, conversations. I want timelines, receipts, faces. I want to know when the lies started and how deep they run. Paul nodded without asking why. He just said, give me 3 days. While he worked in the dark, I stayed in the light strategically. I made a post on Instagram. First one in a year. Just a photo of the jet, tagged back to the grind. The caption was short, silence is strength. But sometimes, the truth needs a little volume. Heather saw it. She commented a single fire emoji. I laughed out loud when I saw it. Like she thought she was still part of this story. But she had no idea what was coming. The next day, I received an envelope at the hotel front desk. No sender. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in thick black ink. Inside were printed screenshots. Heather and Liam in bed. Timestamped photos from 2 months ago. 3 days before our anniversary. One from her business trip to San Francisco where they'd used my name to check into the Four Seasons, bold move. And then the kicker. A notarized document, scanned and printed. A joint account application, her and Liam. Recent. Days old. My hands trembled for the first time since this started. It wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal with paperwork. I didn't eat that day. Just paced. Played their conversations back in my head. Every time she called me babe or said, you're the only one I could ever love, I wanted to rip the walls apart. The next evening, I finally answered one of her calls. She gasped when I picked up. Oh my God, thank you. I've been losing my mind. Can we talk? Just us. We're already talking, I said flatly. I messed up. Okay. I know that. I never wanted to hurt you. Liam, he was. I don't even know what he was. Convenient, I replied. There was silence. You have to understand, she whispered. For years I thought you were just content. Like, no drive, no ambition. You were always humble and quiet and, God, I was bored. Okay? I didn't know you were secretly building an empire. I didn't know you were hiding all this. You were bored. I said, voice low. You mean while you were flying first class on my paycheck-to-paycheck money? While I was paying off your family's debts, setting up trust funds for your niece, building our future while you were letting him do God knows what to you in hotel bathrooms. She didn't speak. You could have just left, I continued. You could have walked away. But you stayed. You acted. You smiled in my face and let him touch you behind my back. Her voice cracked. I didn't know you were capable of this kind of cruelty. Neither did I said. Until I met you. I hung up. That night, I got Paul's report. Everything. Every meeting. Every transaction. Every night she spent with Liam that she told me she was with her friends, at yoga, at some charity event. She even faked a miscarriage once to get out of a trip with me to Italy. Said she needed time to heal. She was healing, all right. In his bed. The next morning, I wired money to 3 separate people, 2 attorneys, and 1 media consultant. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. I wanted her name scorched in every corner of her world. Every friend who thought we were a perfect couple, every socialite she bragged to, every person who ever told me how lucky I was to have her. I wanted them all to see what I saw. I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was erasing a lie. And for once in my life, I wasn't going to do it quietly. 2 weeks after the reunion, the world finally caught up. The tabloid headlines hit first. Forbes art billionaire's wife in scandal with married trainer. Then came the blogs, the podcasts. Even a few late-night shows picked it up. Heather's face was everywhere. Her laughing at a dinner party with Liam, caught in candid shots looking like she didn't have a care in the world. Then the hotel footage leaked. I didn't release it, but someone did. Maybe Paul. Maybe Emily. Maybe Karma. She tried to control the narrative, of course. Released a teary-eyed apology video from some beach house I paid for, claiming she was struggling emotionally and lost herself in the shadows of a marriage built on secrets. She even threw in a bit about mental health and womanhood. I almost applauded the performance. But the internet wasn't buying it. The comment sections tore her apart. People called out the hypocrisy, the lies. Women accused her of setting back their reputation by decades. Men called her every name under the sun, some I wouldn't repeat. Others I agreed with. She shut down her accounts after 3 days. That's when she showed up at my hotel. I was standing at the bar, sipping whiskey, when the front desk called up. "Sir, your wife is here to see you." "She's not my wife," I said. "She's just someone I used to feed." She was waiting in the lobby when I walked out. Dressed in black. No makeup. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the fallout had finally settled on her shoulders. "I just want to talk," she said quietly. "Talk," I said. She followed me to the terrace. Sat across from me, hands folded like a child about to confess to the principal. "You destroyed me," she began. I almost laughed. "No, you destroyed you. I just gave you the stage." She wiped her eyes, but I didn't see tears. Just the same old performance. "I loved you once," she said. "Maybe I still do. I don't know." "No, Heather. You loved what I gave you. The comfort. The name. The illusion. You never once looked at me like I was enough." She flinched. "You want to talk?" I leaned in. "Let's talk. Tell me the truth. When did it start?" She stared at her hands. "The night after your father's funeral." I froze. "That's when you started shutting me out," she whispered. "You went cold. You barely looked at me. I was lonely. I was grieving." "I know," she said. "But it felt like you died too." That was the first time she said something that actually hit me. Not because it justified what she did, but because I realized how far we had both drifted. But only one of us chose to burn the boat. "I'm not here to win you back," she said finally. "I know that's impossible. I don't want to be your enemy." "You already are," I replied. We sat in silence for a few moments. She stood up, reached into her purse, and placed a ring box on the table. "My lawyer will reach out. I won't fight the prenup." I opened the box. My wedding ring. The one I took off the day after I found out. She was giving it back like it was some kind of peace offering. "You can keep it," I said. "Pawn it. Bury it. It's just metal now." She nodded, took a deep breath, and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. She moved to another city, changed her name, tried to start over. But the internet never forgets. As for Liam, he lost his job. His wife took the house, the kids, and apparently even his dog. Last I heard, he was bartending in Vegas and avoiding photographers. Me? I doubled my business, hired new staff, bought a place in Tokyo, then another in the Alps. I started painting again, not for money, not for fame, just for me. And every time someone asks me if I'll ever love again, I tell them this. I probably will, but next time, I'm not hiding anything, especially not myself. Because if she can't love the man before the money, she damn sure doesn't deserve the man after it. 6 months passed. The chaos faded, but the silence didn't bring peace, it brought questions. Late at night, I'd catch myself wondering if any of it had ever been real. If Heather had ever looked at me with love, or if it was always performance. Was I a stepping stone, a safe house, a long con? Or was there, somewhere in those early days, something honest? Then I'd remember the audio files, the texts, the hotel logs, the lies so detailed, so repetitive, they couldn't have been a slip. They were practice. Rehearsed deceit. That's when the bitterness would wash over me again. It didn't paralyze me. It motivated me. I launched a new gallery in New York, the Betrayal Exhibit. Anonymous, raw, brutal pieces. No names. Just pain stitched into canvas. Critics raved. They called it a haunting masterpiece of emotional carnage. One called it like watching a man survive his own funeral and then set fire to the coffin. They didn't know it was my story. Or maybe they did. That night, at the opening, a woman approached me, sharp suit, intelligent eyes, no pretense. She didn't gush over the art. She didn't ask for a photo. She simply said, "I saw the pain behind the oil." And I felt less alone. Her name was Madison. Divorced. 2 kids. Her ex had left her for his assistant for weeks after her cancer diagnosis. Brutal. Honest. Real. We talked all night. Didn't touch. Didn't flirt. Just shared. I didn't know it then, but that night became the first page of my new story. Still, some ghosts don't go quietly. A year after the divorce, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. But the handwriting? I'd recognize it anywhere. Heather. I stared at it for hours. Didn't open it. Not because I was scared of what it said, but because I already knew. It wouldn't be an apology. It would be a performance. It would be a script dressed up in sorrow, begging for closure she didn't deserve. I burned it in the fireplace. Because some chapters aren't meant to be reread. They're meant to be closed, sealed, and buried. Now, when people ask about the jet, the art, the fortune, I smile politely. But when they ask about Heather, I just say this. She mistook my silence for weakness. She mistook my humility for lack of ambition. And she mistook my love for stupidity. And then I walk away. Because the man she betrayed no longer exists. The one who rose from that wreckage? He doesn't look back. The gallery's success snowballed. Invitations came from Paris, Dubai, Seoul. I wasn't just the Forbes artist anymore. I was the guy who painted his scars in blood and oil. People found pieces of themselves in my rage, and the loneliness stretched across those brutal canvases. But I didn't paint her anymore. Not directly. I got it all out, every glance, lie, moan, betrayal. Once it was on the canvas, it didn't belong to me. It belonged to the fire. Madison stayed in my life. Not in a fairy tale, roses and sunsets kind of way. She had her own wounds, her own boundaries. We didn't heal each other. We just didn't make each other bleed. And that was enough for now. One night, we were sitting on the balcony of my place in Tokyo. Neon lights below us, a jazz record playing low, her feet resting in my lap. She looked at me with that steady gaze of hers and said, "You ever wonder what you'd say if she stood in front of you again?" I didn't answer right away. Eventually, I said, "Nothing." I'd let the silence explain everything she ruined. She nodded. "That's colder than anything I could have said." "It's not cold," I said. "It's healed." But part of me wasn't sure that was true. Then came the final blow. Paul called me out of nowhere. "Need to meet. In person. Urgent." We met in a quiet cafe in Prague, of all places. He slid a folder across the table, eyes tired. "Didn't want to send this over email." I opened it. Bank records. Overseas transfers. A shell company. Dates matched with Heather's travel. One particular document stood out, an attempt to move funds from one of my dormant LLCs into an account in Belize. A transfer that had failed only because of a signature mismatch. It had been 3 months ago. "Someone's trying to squeeze through the cracks," Paul said. "Probably hired someone to forge your signature. Looks like an old contact of hers got greedy. She's still trying to take more?" He nodded. "They think time makes you soft." I stared down at her signature. It used to feel familiar. Now it was just sloppy. "We pressing charges?" he asked. I leaned back, heart slow. "No. We're buying them out." "What?" I smiled. "We buy the company they're using. Take everything from the inside. Quietly. They don't even know we own them until the hammer drops." Paul grinned. "That's savage." "No. That's art." 6 weeks later, her contact was broke, indicted, and the Belize account? Frozen. Heather tried to reach out again. Through a friend. Then a lawyer. Then a mutual acquaintance at a charity event. Each time, I had one message sent back. "This conversation ended when you chose a side. You chose the wrong one." By the second year, she was a ghost. People barely mentioned her. And when they did, they referred to her like a cautionary tale. "Remember that woman who cheated on the billionaire and tried to rob him?" I didn't flinch at her name anymore. Because names are just noise once the story ends. I had new ones in my life now. Names that didn't lie. Names that didn't burn when I heard them whispered behind my back. And somewhere along the way, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's peace. Unbothered. Quiet. Alive. A few months later, I got invited to speak at a private symposium in Zurich. Topic: authenticity in art. Normally, I avoided that kind of thing. I wasn't the guy who wore scarves indoors or explained brushstrokes with hand gestures. But something about this one felt different. The room was filled with art investors, critics, creators. People who once wouldn't have given me the time of day now sat on the edge of their seats, waiting for me to say something profound. I didn't give them what they wanted. Instead, I said this: authenticity isn't about truth. It's about the pain you're willing to show when no one's asking. They clapped. A little too long. Afterward, I stood near the back, sipping water, eyes scanning the room. That's when I saw her. Heather. Hair darker now. Thinner. But the posture was the same, elegant, calculated. She was with some venture capital leech in a gray suit and fake smile. She hadn't seen me yet. I turned, ready to leave. Not out of fear, just disinterest. She was a chapter long closed. But then I heard her voice behind me. Elliot. I turned slowly. She smiled like we were old friends running into each other at a wedding. Didn't expect to see you here. I glanced at her companion. You always were good at finding where the money flows. She laughed awkwardly, then dismissed her date with a pat on the arm. I was hoping we'd run into each other eventually. I wasn't. She tilted her head. Still angry. No, I said. That's what you never understood. You weren't important enough to stay angry at. Her eyes narrowed just a bit. That flicker of ego bruised. I heard about the Belize account, she said, voice lower now. That wasn't me. You know that, right? I stepped closer, just enough to make her uncomfortable. I don't care. You're not a person anymore. You're a past event. Like a storm that hit the coast and disappeared. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to cry. I didn't stick around to find out. I walked past her and into the night, Zurich lights glowing like cold fire above the streets. On the flight home, I sat next to an older gentleman who recognized me. Said his wife left him after 30 years. Took the house, the dog, even the damn espresso machine. He asked how I got through it. I looked out the window for a long moment before answering. I didn't survive it, I said. I buried who I was and built someone stronger on top of the ashes. He nodded slowly. Does it stop hurting? Not really, I said. But it stops mattering. Back in Tokyo, I returned to my apartment, poured a glass of whiskey, and opened my sketchbook. No theme. No message. Just lines. Raw, messy, without expectation. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled without bitterness. A year later, I stood in front of my latest piece at a private unveiling in Florence. The canvas was massive, 8 feet tall, 12 feet wide. It was the most brutal, honest thing I had ever painted. No soft tones. No metaphors. Just chaos, layered with clarity. A storm made visible. No name. Just a plaque. Closure. People stood in silence, some with hands over their mouths. One woman cried quietly. A man muttered, I feel like I've lived this. And maybe they had. We all bleed the same shade when love turns into betrayal. Madison was there too. She stood at the back, watching, not needing to say anything. We weren't lovers. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she was a constant now. A quiet presence in a world full of noise. Later that night, after the guests had gone, I walked through the empty gallery alone. The paintings watched me like old friends who knew too much. I stopped in front of one of the older pieces. It was from the early days of the fallout, red, violent, desperate. I remembered the rage, the heartbreak, the fire. I didn't feel it anymore. What I felt now was stillness. Not the numb kind. The earned kind. I thought of Heather one last time. Not with anger. Not with sorrow. Just a distant curiosity. Like remembering the plot of a book you read once and forgot on purpose. I pulled out my phone. Typed one final note to myself and saved it in the archive, never to open again. She thought the betrayal would break me. But it built me. I turned off the lights, locked the gallery behind me, and walked out into the night, free.